Hi, my name is Eva Maria Mücke, and I'm glad that you're joining us today to learn more about NITC's Pool Fund Grant. The overarching goal of today's webinar is to tell you more about how to construct a competitive pool fund statement for NITC. But to do so, I do need to give you a little bit of background on Pool Fund Project, a sense of what we are looking for in a pool fund statement, and what you can do to select a problem for a statement that is a fit and that will maximize your chances of finding partners. But before we get started, Hau Hagedorn, NITC's interim director, will give you a brief overview over NITC to put this grant competition into perspective. Go ahead, Hau.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hau Hagedorn, and I just thought it would be nice to provide some context for the University Transportation Center program for those who are unfamiliar with us. So NITC was established under the Safety Loo legislation back in 2005. We were formerly known as OTREC, and we became a national UTC under MAP 21. With partners from across the country. Currently, our partners include the University of Oregon, the Oregon Institute of Technology, the University of Utah, the University of Arizona, as well as the University of Texas at Arlington. And through this consortium of university partners, we are one of 32 UTCs designated by the U.S. Department of Transportation. And the goal of our center is to promote research, education, and technology transfer that relates to our theme of improving mobility of people and goods to build strong communities. And underneath these fit in line with the USD strategic goals, and these include increasing access to opportunities, improving multimodal planning and shared use of infrastructure, advancing innovation and smart cities, as well as developing data models and tools. And typically with our UTCs, our grant program focuses on furthering research that comes from our faculty research partners. And that is done annually through a general request for proposal. However, several years ago, we initiated a program that's very similar to the state DOT-led pool fund research program that is more geared towards local agencies, organizations, and other partners that can pool smaller amounts of funding in order to tackle research projects that may have some national significance across city boundaries, state boundaries, etc. And so with that, and with that context, I will hand it back over to Eva Maria to talk through the details of our pooled fund program.
Thank you, Hau. All right, so let's move on. So many of you are probably familiar with the concept of gathering funds from different sources as a means to sponsor projects in transportation. So why is this approach taken to fund some projects but not others? Hau alluded to this already a little bit. So the premise of a pool fund project is that it pursues a problem that is pressing, meaning that the problem needs to be solved now rather than later. At the same time, it should be relevant regionally or nationally. In other words, many are impacted by this problem. And considering this its broad impact, agencies are asked to contribute by providing funds and guidance as part of what's called a technical advisory committee. So this achieves a couple of things. One is it spreads the financial burden, and but most importantly, this approach really makes sure that everyone who's touched by the problem collaborates and is willing to coordinate tasks. So I do want to give you a sense of how you as an agency benefits by this approach. So for agencies, for you will get a problem solved overall by contributing minimal resources, that is investment in time, manpower, and money. And you have a chance to provide input throughout the problem by being part of that technical advisory committee. And so you can make sure that the project will ultimately give you the outcome that you are looking for. And once the project is completed, a new tool is added to your toolbox, and you will be able to be better equipped to do your job. Something you may also want to consider is that you will be making an impact and ultimately affect a lot of people in one shape or form. Now, here's the point actually I want to make. Keep in mind that you add in just a little bit of money, but it adds up to a lot in the long run. And pool fund project overall have a fairly broad impact many. For example, they prevent the duplication of efforts. After all, agencies work together rather than each one doing its own thing. Since the partners are financially invested in the project, it also ensures that everyone who is touched by the project collaborates and is willing to coordinate tasks. And this process leads to the implementation of a project that is pressing, relevant, and matters, and therefore make sure that the outcome is practice ready. Now, the latter reasons are ultimately why NITC is offering this grant opportunity, because we want to make sure that we invest the grant dollars we received from our funder, USDOT, to support research that is pressing and is bound to make an impact. And we can only do this with your help, and I'm more than happy to support you along the way. Please keep that in mind. All right, so the pool fund process really consists of two steps. The first step is to identify a problem that is relevant to a region or across the country. And this is what this call for problem statements is all about. We need your input. You are the boots on the ground who knows what is needed. The deadline to submit problem statements is May 15th, but we encourage you to start a conversation with us about your ideas before then. So after that deadline, NITC's executive committee will select one or two proposals for funding. That's in late May, early June. And once a statement is selected, match is secured from agency partners. And here is something I need to point out in terms of what differentiates NITC's pooled fund grant from other pool fund opportunities. We expect partners to contribute cash match to the project. NITC then matches this amount and as a result doubles the funds available for the project. So keep in mind, each partner chips in a little, and then ultimately the sum, we double the amount, adding up to a substantial amount that is able to fund the entire project. So now we are ready to move on to step 2 of this process, which is issuing a request for proposals to our consortium members and asking our experts to submit proposals on how they intend or propose to address the problem, giving the outlined needs, research objectives, and requested outcome. If all goes as expected, we anticipate to release this RFP mid-July, and once the proposals are received, the Technical Advisory Committee will select the winning proposal. Now, the preliminary timeline we have set for the proposal deadline is October 1st, and we anticipate the project to start on December 1st. And once that project starts, the research team is expected to keep the Technical Advisory Committee up to date on the progression of the project, and the TAC is also expected to provide input as needed. So as of right now, we anticipate funding one problem statement, but based on the budget of the selected statement, we may also be able to fund a second one. We are also planning to issue another request for a pooled fund statement next year, following a similar timeline as this year. So keep that in mind. as you are preparing a proposal. So even if you're not selected this time around, there's always next year. So for now, however, I do want to delve into what it takes to create a strong problem statement for this specific grant opportunity. And I want to get started by talking about the elements of a problem statement. So NITC's pooled fund problem statement consists of 7 elements. I have listed them here on the left, and I want to briefly review what you need to consider for each one of them. This is not just to clarify what we will be looking for, but also to help you write a clear and compelling statement that will convince other organizations to collaborate with you. So bear with me, even if some of the points seem to be intuitive. I'm sure some of them will be useful even if you're an experienced writer. So let's get started with a problem title. So the title of your statement should capture the essence of the overarching problem statement in as few words as possible. In other words, it should provide the reader with a good sense of what the statement is all about. Think of branding. So I've listed this here on top of that entire list, but a title is usually something you come up with once you've finished writing the statement. You know, at this point, you fleshed out all the details and are ready to articulate, in a nutshell, the focus of the statement. Keep that in mind. All right. Now, the next one is the research problem. So the research problem should be unique, should articulate a unique and pressing issue that needs to be resolved now and that is relevant to many. And it's important that this is that you articulate that in a convincing fashion. This is also something, and this is also something where you actually have to provide some context in order to draw folks in order to be convincing. What I've not listed here is the fact that it has to fit in with NITC's theme, something how Hagedorn outlined earlier, and I will talk about that a little later. Now, the next part is the research objective. Now, this is how you actually propose to solve the problem. Now, if you have a specific task in mind, please include them here as well. My comment here is if you have trouble fleshing out this section, this is again where I suggest to first skip ahead to the next section, that's anticipated product and impact. Having clearly spelled out what you actually want to get out of the research will give you a better idea of what research needs to be done to fill the knowledge gap. So keep that in mind. So let's go on to the anticipated product. This is what you need, the solution to your problem, and the reason why you are actually writing the problem statement here. What information, what data, what guidance or tool will you need and help others to deal with the problem at hand? This needs to be explicit. That will inform your research objective. Now we're getting into the logistics. The cost estimated in research period. This section is fairly straightforward. Provide a cost estimate that will include the amount you expect to receive from NITC as well as the total cash amount you and your partners are able to bring to the table. So that's the big picture. How much will the research cost? What is your estimated project duration? To give you a general idea, the duration for a pool fund project tends to be about 15 months. Of course, we need to know the individual or individuals who are submitting this statement. Please list them here. And lastly, we do need to know all partners who have committed to support the project so far and how much cash each partner is willing to chip in. A critical point I want to stress here is that the contributions have to be cash. We are not looking for partners in this section who are interested in making in-kind contributions. Those are not considered during the application process. The partners listed here have to contribute cash. So let's take a moment and walk through a problem statement that has been funded to give you a clearer picture of what a good problem statement looks like. After that, I will flesh out some points a little further, and how Hagedorn actually will introduce one of the problem statements NITC funded and highlight some of the elements I mentioned. Go ahead, Hao.
Thanks, Ava Maria. So in 2015, so NITC has funded 2 pooled fund research projects in the past. The first one was a pooled fund study that helped to develop a national non-motorized transportation data archive, and that project it is complete and is venturing into the next phases of building out that archive. The second project that we funded deals with developing contextual guidance at intersections for protected bike lanes. And this idea came from the City of Portland. Roger Geller, who is the bike coordinator for the City of Portland, he has been working with a number of partners nationally on this question. So basically, the context for the problem is that it stemmed from the rapid increase of protected and separated bike lanes being built by cities around the country. So just within a 6-year period, there was an increase from 40 lanes in 20 cities to 210 lanes in 62 jurisdictions. But there was a lack of design guidance for these cities to implement. There are a lot of questions when you're building these bike lanes, and so there was a lack of guidance and context, and so he identified this as a potential research statement. Next slide, please. Ava Maria, can you switch it to the next slide, please?
Sorry, I'm working on that. Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Here.
Great. So as I had mentioned, there was this issue, but there was a lack of guidance, and the problem was that there were a lot of variation within the designs that were implemented. And so he was able to work with a number of cities from cities as well as one transit agency, and then SHRAM, which was a nonprofit foundation, to identify financial commitment for this project. So each partner contributed between $5,000 to $10,000 in order to help find matching funds for this project. And NITC came with additional funds in order to come up with a final budget of around $250,000 to work on this research project. Next slide. So what makes this problem statement so compelling, and why did we fund it? So there are a number of factors that made it compelling. It was a nationally relevant and timely issue that was identified. It also had a very strong project champion who was able to go out there to find the matching funds for the project, and he also had a pretty strong and clear idea of what research needed to be done. And so he was able to articulate that very well in a problem statement, including some expected products out of it. And then also this willingness to champion and work with the researchers to move forward the idea. And so again, I want to emphasize that the strength in this research really lies in the partners that are willing to pool their funds and willing to participate in this process. So ultimately, researchers who are working on this project are at Portland State University, and they're looking to wrap up the project by this fall and hoping to share results and once that project is complete. So with that, that's an example of a successful research project that was submitted to our process. I hand it to Eva Maria now to just talk about the problem and some of the issues that we've seen with this process. We want to also encourage the attendees to submit questions if you have any. Talking, but part of this webinar is to help answer any questions you may have, especially if you're interested in participating in this process. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Adrienne.
Thank you, Hal. All right, audio, you broke up there at the end for a little bit. I'd like to get back and think about, okay, so you have identified a problem. I mean, this is, that's great. Maybe one, maybe two or more, but the question is the problem a fit for a pooled fund project? Is the problem pressing? Do many different cities or municipalities have that issue, right? In addition, can you get potential partners interested, right? With the pool fund project, how Hagedorn described, that was critical in order to secure enough funding to really proceed. So I've listed, and I guess the one point I want to make sure you understand is that these issues, both in terms of the breadth of it and getting folks involved, are not mutually exclusive. What I mean by that, if you have a pressing problem that affects many, most likely cities you are contacting are wrestling with it too. If so, there's actually quite a good chance that you can get them engaged. And this is why, in fact, why I have relevance and interest grouped here together. Please keep that in mind. And so what I want to do first is look at relevance. And this is something you can actually investigate quite quickly and then move on in terms of interest. So my recommendation is that you first visit the TRB Research Needs Statement database. And let's go to the site and to see why this is a good starting point. And I'm going to click on that link just so you get a sense of what you get once you move there. So this is the place where you can search the TRB Research Needs database, or the needs that have been identified by standing committees. So individuals on those committees are expert in their field and who will have a clear understanding what issues are currently pressing. And let me type in a keyword, and I'm going to pick a broad one. Let's do multimodal. Let's see what comes up. Multimodal, all right. I'd like you to notice here that each one of these, so it's a broad term, and I did that on purpose to point out that a number of committees actually brought up, outlined need statements that were triggered with that key term. So needless to say, when you come up with a problem, most likely you'll need to narrow it down, use a more specific key term. But the point is, this is really a great starting point to ask that question. Has my problem been identified as an important issue that needs to be addressed? So 10 minutes of your time will give you a good sense if your problem caught the attention of a committee. And if you find a research needs statement that addresses your problem, make sure you mention it in your problem statement. In fact, the very first pooled fund problem statement we funded, how Hagedorn mentioned, made that point. It was actually identified as a need in this database, and that basically made it rise to the top. So keep that in mind. All right, let's go to the next one, and many of you might be familiar with it. That's the TRIT database. Let's go to that one. So it's really important that you do a literature search on your topic. And that search will essentially give you the context for your project. That's important because it gives you evidence and arguments as to why your problem needs to be addressed. So TRIT, that's just bottom line. You have to be compelling. That's how you can be compelling. But there's another reason why you want to use TRIT. And because it also searches the research in progress database, RIP. And and that basically will allow you to figure out if somebody else is already working on the problem in order to make sure that you're not trying to work on something somebody else is already pursuing. And a couple of ways of how you can actually do that. So you can just type in your keyword, but if you specifically want to ask that question, is somebody already working on this? You can actually go in and look at source and then specifically select research in progress, type in your keywords up here, and it'll basically pull up any sort of research statement that's related to that. And that will answer your question, is somebody else working on the problem? So keep that in mind. That's highly recommended. Now, at the end of this presentation, I have a lot more resources listed. I choose not to include them here because I do want to caution you not to get lost in what I call literature vertigo. So gathering too much information and looking at too many search engines can get very quickly overwhelming. And so I do recommend that you are strategic. Use the sites I recommended. These two will give you lots of good information. And set a timer. How much time do you want to spend gathering information, and then run with what you found. And if you need more information at that point, it's really best to activate your network as your next step. Ask others questions and help you fill in the gaps. And that really brings me to that second point I want to talk about in terms of how you can drum up interest. And that's in fact also that way. Remember I said that relevance and interest is, those are really two things that are not mutually exclusive. Yes, activate your network, because this is also how you get information as well as how you drum up interest. So basically at this point, contact colleagues from other agencies or other contacts you have from meetings. Ask them to activate their network. If you were able to find enough information to finalize a problem statement, pass it along. If not, use this as an opportunity to pick their brain and ask for their input. You don't need to go this alone. Which brings me also to that very last point, and that is an important point I want to make here, that we are here to help you along the way. And specifically contact me. I'm happy to look into questions you may have. I might not have the answer, but I bet I can find them for you. So please reach out if you get stuck, and if you have a question, I'd be happy to help you. Now, next, I do want to address a question, which is an issue that is important, how Hagedorn already alluded to it, and that deals with vetting your problem. So let's assume you already identified it's definitely one that's a good fit for a problem statement, but then it has to really pass another threshold, which is, does it fit within NITC's theme? Now, I've outlined the relevant components of NITC's theme here, and how Hagedorn already mentioned those to you. And it's really important that whatever you come up with, your problem fits within that. And unfortunately, we are not able to fund problems that do not fit within those 4 parameters I've listed here, because we really NITC's theme, we focus on improving mobility of people and goods to build strong communities, and we do this by increasing access to opportunities. We do this by improving multimodal planning and shared use infrastructure. We do this by, yes, funding research advancing that advances innovation and smart cities, and by funding research that develops data, models, and tools. And somehow your problem has to fit in there. And that's a commitment we made to US DOT. So we are kind of bound by that. There's a lot of small print there, and I'd like you to read that very carefully to ask that question, does my problem fit into that? And I do want to, I have another picture of you to kind of give you a little bit of visual and think about this. So this shows the thematic distribution of the research projects we funded in 2017. So essentially 42% of the project we funded fell into that multimodal category, 26% fell into the category that focused on increasing access to opportunities. The bottom line I really want to make that any problem has to be linked to either one or more of those thematic elements. They have to fit in a bucket. If you don't know if it does, contact me. I can tell you that very quickly. Researchers tend to do that, and I'm actually very happy when they do, rather than them working on a problem and it turns out it's not a fit. Ask me. Happy to help. All right. Moving on to the next part. Okay, so what are the things you need to consider? What have we learned looking at application in terms of looking at mistakes people have made? What's important? This seems to be intuitive, initially straightforward, right? Include all elements. That's seems to be straightforward, but well, unfortunately, we have received problem statements in the past where we haven't received all of those elements. Remember that we only ask for 2 pages. That's the length, the maximum length of that problem statement. We want to have all these elements included. They should be fleshed out. That's what we're asking for. Please include all that information. In terms of the research problem, remember that the actual problem is probably the most important section in your problem statement. You need to convince partners, as well as us, NITC, that the problem is pressing and of broad relevance. And you can only do this if you do your homework and do some literature research. Do your due diligence. If needed, discuss the problem with others. That's recommended. You know, yes, money is always tight, but in-kind match will not suffice for this project. And don't get deterred, right? People are always they offer in-kind support rather than cash, because the reason why I showed you that very first, you know, one of the initial slides where I outlined the benefits is because overall, everybody benefits from these projects. Use that information, point out how agencies will benefit, point out how communities will benefit, point out how individuals will benefit when your problem is solved. Make that clear. Transportation is very personal, and sometimes it's important to help folks make that connection. Be persuasive, do it. And don't forget, if you are stuck, don't get just hung up. Contact me. Happy to help anywhere along the way. That's the one thing I've learned working in this position is that I've seen that proposals that tend to be successful are also those where I've actually been contacted about little things and they're stuck. People contact me, I get it resolved, they move on. So please contact me, reach out, I'd be happy to help. So you completed your problem statement, but then there's always this question, did I hit the mark? Well, I've listed here some hallmarks of a good problem statement, and it really helps if you hand your problem statement to a colleague and ask to read it and check these off. Um, does that statement meet all of those criteria I've listed here? Can a person actually put a check mark right next to all of those and see what happens? Take the feedback and move on. That is really helpful. Get that input, especially from a person, an outsider, because after all, the folks who will be reading it may not be experts. Get that input. All right. Now, that's as much as I wanted to say about preparing a successful problem statement. As promised, I have some additional resources listed here. Sometimes they are helpful. I do want to put them out there. Keep in mind. I do want to say a word of caution here that I don't want to have you get into this literature vertigo. I've seen that too often. Use these resources with caution. I do want to acknowledge some resources I drew on for this presentations. Feel free to look at them as well. And otherwise, we are ready to take some questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ava Maria. I just wanted to add that we didn't touch on the entire timeline for the pooled fund research project. So submitting the research statements is the first part. Once we meet with the NITC Executive Committee, then we select a statement to move forward. And then at that point, we actually work with whomever the project champion from the agency side is in order to develop a request for proposal that we release to all of our consortium members. At that point with the RFP is open to all NITC researchers to respond to. They submit a proposal, and then the TAC that is developed from the agency partners will review the proposals and select the proposal that fits the tax needs. And so that is the entire process from start to finish, and then the TAC will work with the researchers to complete the research project. So I just wanted to clarify that since we didn't really talk about the whole entire timeline.
Okay, thank you, Hal.
All right, so with that, I don't think we have any questions that were submitted online, but feel free to reach out to either Ava Maria or myself. We are here to help you seed ideas as well as connect you to potential partners from other agencies. As we mentioned before, we have all types of agencies that have participated in this pooled fund process. We have cities, transit agencies, MPOs. The more partners, the better. And feel free to reach out to your network to connect with those. Actually, we do have one question. I need to increase the screen. It said, okay, so this one is from Casey Berg. Only 9% of funding for 2017 went to smart cities. Are you looking to balance the proportions among the 4 focus area, or do you intend to fund similar proportions? So we don't have target proportions when we set out to fund research projects. I know that smart cities is a near and pressing need, and that fits well with our center's theme. So, and I think the proportions or the percentages are reflections of the topic areas that are submitted. So I think that aligns more closely with the types of projects that we are seeing. Okay. We have another question. Great. So this one is from Tashi Forrest. Does the project champion need to be a public agency employee? No, it does not need to be a public agency employee at all. Just typically in the past, that's what we've seen with the this previous pooled fund study on the contextual design of protected intersections. One of the partners was SRAM, which was a foundation, so that wasn't a public agency employee at all. So that individual is a part of the TAC, and they are participating in the research project and moving that forward. So we encourage all types of folks to participate in this process. All right. So with that, again, feel free to reach out to Ava Maria as well as myself. And we do thank you for your time, and we hope that you have some ideas that we can help move forward. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.